My name's Eric Gurley. I'm the Executive Director of Access Alaska. Access Alaska is a center for independent living that serves many of the regions of the state of Alaska. We have multiple programs, and those are all designed to support people experiencing disabilities and seniors. And one of the things that we tend to focus on is advocacy, and today is about putting that vision to practice. So this is actually the second in what we deem to be a 5-part series on advocacy, and we call them Tea Talks, just so folks take a break and listen to prominent figures. These moments then are meant to highlight advocacy through conversation, mentorship, interview style. And again, we're looking to hear from distinguished leaders in the field. Today on the screen, we have Denny Mocklian. Denny is our Director of Compliance and Administration. We also have Bridget Barstad, who's the Director at Access of our Independent Living Program. Our guest today is Dr. Temple Grandin, a professor of animal science at Colorado State University and disabilities rights advocate. Dr. Grandin is the author of several books, 11, some with a focus on autism, also more than 60 scientific papers on animal behavior. And Dr. Grandin is a leader in her field on both topics. We're very excited to have you join us, Professor Grandin.
Well, it's great to be here.
So what I like to do is I introduce the audience a little bit. We have adults on the screen that are primarily advocates, self-advocates, providers, joining agencies across the state, all of them very interested in hearing and learning from you. And in particular, I hoped you could start with talking to us about your role as an advocate and how you see the role of an advocate today.
Well, when I first started my career in the cattle industry, nobody even knew I was autistic. And being a woman in a man's industry in the 70s was a much bigger barrier than autism ever was. People just thought I was weird. And what I learned to do when I was starting out doing some freelance jobs on designing cattle handling facilities, I learned to sell my skills by showing off my work. Like, for example, here's one of my drawings, one of my facilities. It's in Thinking in Pictures. And then I also have got photographs of a lot of my facilities. And I would simply show people pictures of my work. And people saw the work, they go, wow, that's really nice. Like, here's a photo right here of one of my projects right there. And people, I learned to sell my work rather than myself. I think that's really important. So I'm a big believer in portfolios and showing what you can do, because socially I was totally awkward. And what I'm seeing in the autism now is a lot of granddads come up to me that discover they're autistic when the kids get diagnosed, and those granddads had jobs because they learned working skills. So, you know, that's something that's very different than somebody who might get injured and then get a severe physical disability. See, the needs are really different. But when you're different, you know, just selling the work, I just showed them what I could do. And then when they saw the work, also, lots of times people don't see doors to opportunity. One scene that's really important in the movie, the HBO movie, that actually happened, it's the scene where I get the card from the editor of the magazine. Because I realized if I write for that magazine, that's going to really, really help my career. And I just would design a cattle facility, and then I wrote about it. And then people would track me down and have me design it. So writing was really important. There's all kinds of doors to opportunity, and people don't see them. Or they'd be too scared to go up and get the editor's card. You see, that's the other thing, too scared to get the card. I got the card. And then after I got the card, I produced a good article summarizing my master's thesis work on cattle handling.
I took note and just learning as much as I could about you in terms of your work ethic. and how you would develop those work skills. How would you encourage somebody to develop the work skills necessary to move forward?
Okay, now let's say I want to start teaching work skills to kids with paper routes and volunteer jobs at the church or something like that, to learn how to do tasks on a schedule outside the home. But let's say you have an adult that never learned any work skills. See, one of the big problems I'm seeing with fully verbal individuals with autism, and I'm qualified as fully verbal individuals that are autistic, is getting too baby. They're not learning work skills. Things like shopping. 16-year-old good student in school, never gone shopping by themselves. Not learning how to have a budget and handle money. Just basic things. Not learning driving. All of ordering food in restaurants. Just all this basic stuff like this. And I see certain moms that just can't let go. When I suggest that their kid go in the store and buy something, I'm not talking about something dangerous. I'm talking about going in a store and, buy a can of soup or something. Something completely harmless.
And it's known that your mother was a very strong presence.
Well, she was always pushing me to do new things. When I was like 8 years old, she was always encouraging me, my art ability, always encouraging that. She was encouraging me to do lots of different kinds of art and not just draw the same stuff over and over again. She was she knew just how much to push me.
As our role of being an independent living center, one of the 5 principles is advocacy, individual and systemic advocacy. What successes have you seen in the development of inclusive communities and in business settings, either one or both?
Well, the thing is, I'll just talk about some differences in thinking. Okay. And it took me a long time to realize that verbal thinkers, people who think mostly in language, tend to be top down. What you asked me now is a very, very top down question. Mm-hmm. And then some people wrote in a chat one time that all I did was talk about myself and some other cases. But you see, I'm a bottom up thinker. Concepts are made by specific examples. I have some specific examples of not shopping. I've got, or specific examples of jobs that worked and jobs that don't work, specific ones. And then I start looking at what common factors are in the jobs that failed. This is for autism, and the jobs that worked. Well, the jobs that failed were way too much multitasking, way too much chaos and noise, takeout windows, super crazy busy stores. And the jobs that worked were required a retail, a skilled trade, office supply store, farm supply store was a lot quieter environment. Those jobs worked. The jobs that worked did not have a lot of multitasking. You see, I'm a bottom-up thinker. So my approach would be more, one specific example at a time. Okay, let's say we do some big success with getting somebody employed, then you get an article about it in the paper about that individual. You see, that's kind of the approach I used with pushing cattle handling. I designed a corral for a ranch. It was in Oregon, one of my first jobs, and I made sure it got into the Oregon Farm Magazine. See, that's more the bottom-up approach. There's a place for both approaches. Mm-hmm. But my mind tends to be associative. That's why a lot of my books have co-authors, because I need that for the organization. So that's an example of the different kinds of thinkers working together. But there's actually scientific research now that there are different kinds of thinkers. And I'm an object visualizer who thinks in pictures. Mm-hmm. And then there's a mathematician kind of mind. And then there are the people that are totally verbal. And then there are people that are mixtures of the different kinds of thinking.
That's great. That was one of my questions. I was going to ask you to speak about all 3. And thank you for that
different kinds of thinking. And in my book, The Autistic Brain, mm-hmm. I present scientific research here that the different kinds of thinking really exist. And the scientific names for my kind of thing is object visualizer. I am an object visualizer. Then you have the mathematical mind, that's the visual spatial. And those two are really different. Some people are mixtures, but you're not going to find an extreme object visualizer and a super genius mathematician in the same person. And the object visualizers, they're that person that can fix just anything, build anything. I recently went out and visited some new equipment at an experiment station. And one thing I noticed is that the stuff wasn't built as well. And I think some of that goes back, at least in a lot of states down in the, what you call the lower 48, they've taken a lot of the hands-on classes out of our schools. And so that kid that ought to become that welder that can build anything, he's playing video games in the basement because he never had a chance to try welding. I'm not saying everybody needs to go into welding. That's not true. But there needs to be the opportunity to try a lot of different things.
Hands-on approach and utilizing fundamentals to build upon the skills.
Yeah, you see, now that's talking about it very top down, very, very verbal. See, now I see a picture, say office supply store. I see the office supply store is next to the supermarket I go to. You see that it's a specific office supply store I tend to see. But they have a certain thing, sameness, about them, the chain stores, and go somewhere else similar. But you see, I get a picture of office supply store, for example.
Okay. Another question that I had was, given your success, I mean, last year, I don't know if a lot of people know this, you were named one of the top 10 college professors in the United States.
Well, I was just flabbergasted. I was so happy. I was almost, I don't know, couldn't believe it when I saw that.
That's amazing. I wanted to know about the role of mentors in your life.
Oh, super important. Mentors are super important. Starting off with a really good speech teacher when I was a little kid. My mother always pushing me. She didn't baby me. She'd give me choices. She always worked on developing my ability in art. Then there was Mr. Carlock, my science teacher, another super important mentor who gave me interesting projects and got me interested in studying so to become a scientist. He was super important. There was Anne out at the ranch, another very important mentor. When I went to graduate school, I'd visit her on weekends. Super important. And then there was Jim the contractor. And he seeked me out because he'd seen some of my drawings and he got me to design jobs and sell jobs for him. You see that? And we built jobs together for 10 years and he showed me how to get my business started. How do you set up a business? He showed me how to do that. Another super important person. So that's a whole bunch of mentors.
Yes.
They were very, very important.
I'm busy trying to think in terms of your explanation of the visual thinker.
Well, the
Can you
visual
explain?
thinker. Okay, now let me see about visual thinking with you. You're probably at home right now.
I'm in my office, actually.
You're in your office. Okay. Okay, now it's easy for you to just see in your mind using your key to open your front door.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay, now I'm going to think about something that you're not quite so familiar with. Think about a church steeple. How does it come into your mind?
From the outside. I just see it from the outside.
What does it look like?
In my mind, it's round and then it goes up to a point. It's pretty symmetrical.
Do you see it, or is it how is it lines or the image?
Mm-hmm.
You do see an image, but it's real generalized. You see the person who's the extreme visual thinker starts naming the churches off.
Mm-hmm.
And the HBO movie shows exactly how I think. But the questions you've asked me are very, very top down.
Mm-hmm.
We're very, very top down verbal questions. And a lot of the people you're working with are not going to be top down. And that's why social skills have to be taught, like training somebody in a foreign country. Okay, let's say you've got an autistic person working in your office supply store, and that person started commenting on fat customers, let's say. Well, you've got to take them in private, back in the office, and make it very plain, telling them very quietly that kind of talk is not acceptable at work. And you explain why you don't do this. It's almost like teaching somebody how to behave in a foreign country. And you have to explain what they should do. Okay, let's say working on selling. You might say, well, watch Susie, how she interacts with the customer, and then try to copy that. You see, tell them what they should do, and you correct this, do this correction in private.
Modeling is a good method for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the thing is, I worked with skilled welding people and machinery design people in my when I supervised my construction projects.
Mhm.
And I worked with about 20% of these people, either autistic, dyslexic, or ADHD. And they owned metal fabrication companies. They had 20 patents. They had successful businesses. And they took, well, I know two of them, they took a single welding class in high school, and they have very, very good business.
That's a great example as well.
Yeah, you see, then if you're dealing with all disabilities, it means you have somebody got in an accident, that's in a wheelchair, and they're 30 years old. That's a totally different deal than somebody with autism. See, that's the problem. You know, like I was just came off of a seminar I did with parents and teachers of autistic kids. And again, they ask questions that are too vague. Like, I don't even know how old the child is. A 3-year-old? An adult? I don't know. I have to get a lot more specific information in order to make suggestions on what they should do. So you got a lot of autistic individuals trying to find work right now?
We have been working under the confines of COVID. So our program called PREEDS has been on, it's been stalled trying to get our school systems in place and moving things forward. But prior to that, we did serve some folks who experienced autism with employment.
Well, one of the things we can encourage people to do is just find back doors into jobs. Like I'll say to parents, what about my kid interviewed for some job and got rejected. I said, well, who do you know that runs a store, owns a shop? They'll kind of go, I don't know. But then you question them more, you can find somebody that that owns a florist shop or an ice cream shop or something like that, and you get them to try the person out. We got to look at a lot more of those back doors. But I think it's important that they get a job where the boss is somebody outside the family. Okay, like I talked to one lady, she owned a whole bunch of real estate offices. And I said, your daughter can work for your company, but not in the office with you in it. She needs to be out in one of the branch offices where somebody else is the boss.
I'm ready to go to the audience for some questions, and what we'd like is the audience member to ask you the question. I understand you like that interaction.
Okay, there's only one question. If they want to just, I'm working with somebody wrote, I'm working with adults with autism who are looking for work. Okay, now one of the things I would do, I want to see what the person's skills are. What are their skills? I'm going to start looking away with anybody. The other thing is there's jobs that are training jobs, and then there are jobs that are suitable careers. And this differentiation is often not made. I'm seeing too many people that ought to be working for a computer company, working at bagging groceries for 10 years, where there's a point when they need to go beyond that. For a lot of people, that's a super good training job.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not a suitable career. And then some people, your only way upwards at a grocery store would be a manager, and that'd be a headache. The biggest problem you got to deal as a manager at a place like that is all employee squabbles. I have a friend who owns a store, and I don't know, it's like a soap opera what goes on in that store. And you know, as a manager, you've got to deal with that stuff, you know, with that kind of stuff. So you
In
gotta,
terms,
I
in
would
terms
like,
of-
I would, you know. And the other thing, let me just give some tips on once they get a job. Long strings of verbal information does not work. All right, let's say we're going to show them how to close out the cash drawer. Give them a pilot's checklist. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Pilot's checklist. No strings of verbal information. Jobs with lots of multitasking are often bad. The other thing is a person with autism it takes longer to train. Often takes longer to train. One of the complaints I've gotten is they were too slow. But then once they learn a job, they can be really good at it if you're willing to take the time to train them. They also won't just quit on you. They'll show up for work. You know, there's some advantages for hiring people on the autism spectrum. Like right now, and where you're at, you're in what, Juneau?
Actually, Anchorage, Alaska.
All right, what are your big industries in Anchorage?
Well,
Yeah,
we
think
have
of
lots
jobs, so
of,
I know what your industries are.
we have lots of food, lots of retail.
Yeah, and everybody has that.
Yeah, there's some travel, of course, that's seasonal. The fishing and seafood industries are also seasonal. And then the hospitality industry. There's a lot of hotels here.
Okay, a lot of hospitality. Well, you know, there's some people on the spectrum that would like being out on, I mean, watch that show Deadliest Catch.
Mhm.
Watch that.
Perhaps.
Well, there's some people on the spectrum where they think that should be wonderful. You know, it's not for everybody, but and then skilled trades. See, the visual thinkers, a lot of the visual thinkers would be very, very good at skilled trade.
Mhm. Okay. I have a question from Kim Nesbitt. Kim, when you come on, if you could let Dr. Grandin know your role before you ask your question. Denny, can you allow Kim to speak?
She should be able to.
I can't tell if I'm on or not.
You're on. You're
You
on.
I'm
are.
on. Okay. I don't see myself on camera.
But I
so,
can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay.
Fine.
Hi, Dr. Grandin. My name is Kim Nesbitt. I am a vocational rehabilitation counselor here in Fairbanks. And I do carry a caseload with individuals who experience autism. And the question that you referred to earlier was my question. I'm currently working with a young man who is in his early 20s. He has very limited independent living skills. I think because possibly he was kind of babied and everything
this
was
is the
done for
problem.
him.
They get too babied, and
Yeah.
I just can't believe the amount of teenagers that are fully verbal that have never gone shopping by themselves.
Yes. And
Oh,
I'm not sure, how he does with cooking meals. I think it's very limited. He's got roommates that do a lot of things as well for him. The thing is that he doesn't have any previous work experience and he wants to jump right into a job. I think
what?
that
What does he
what's-
want to jump into?
he would like to work at a coffee shop.
Okay, well, that's an entry level job.
Yeah.
It has quite a bit of multitasking.
It also has a lot of dealing with the public, which I'm not really sure how well he
Well, you
would
have
do
to
with
teach
that.
him. You have to teach him scripts. That's business social. First of all, sex, religion, and politics you do not bring to the coffee shop. Period. Sports, pets, and weather. Yeah, usually those are pretty safe.
Okay.
And that can be taught. That's business social. And then you have something for him to do. Let's say a customer gets mad because they made the wrong coffee. and they're just going to have a script of how you respond to mad customers. You just, you know, you kind of, it's like acting in a play. This is business social. This can be learned. And you know, you train them, you know, how to greet a customer. And then you also train them that if something's wrong with the order, like they got the wrong stuff put in the coffee, you can, if it's wrong, let's say that you made the coffee drink wrong, then you would just say, okay, I'll make you a new one, or I'll give you a refund.
Mm-hmm.
You give them scripts, kind of pre-rehearsed scripts. The other thing, before you throw them into it, I'd let him watch the coffee shop operate maybe for a day.
I did suggest that he go hang out there.
Yep, and I think that's a really good idea. In other words, that's kind of trying on the job. One thing about a coffee shop is you can just sit at a table and find out whether that's something you're going to want to do. What
Mhm.
attracts him to a coffee shop?
I think this particular coffee shop, you know, it's well known, and it's kind of, you know, a famous brand name.
Okay.
And I believe he enjoys having their coffee.
But I think having, you're right on having them hang out there. Because some of those coffee jobs, a lot of multitasking.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, and I
Is
would not, like, let's say an old fashioned cash register, I have to make change that have me fired the first day. I don't have the enough working memory to do that. An automated one I could work, but
yeah, I encouraged him to go to sit in the coffee shop, have some coffee, kind of watch what happens behind the scenes,
yes.
and then get back together with me to see what he thought about that.
No, that sounds like a really good idea.
Thank you, Dr. Grandin, for answering my question.
You know, I think that's the thing to do. And this is a person, how did he do in school?
He struggled a little bit in school, especially with math. And he actually graduated a little bit later.
Does he have anything he's really good at doing?
Virtual kind of video games.
You know, this is the thing, these kids are going into these video games, and if they were, but they don't seem to like progress into programming and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's almost like he lives in that world. Like there's like that's his social outlet.
Yeah, and that's fine to have, you know, have some of that, but a job is going to be in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm seeing too many kids on the spectrum get addicted to video games. I've looked at some of the literature on video games, and I got a book called The Loving Push. It's called The Loving Push. Worked on that with Deborah Moore, and I did a big lit search on video game addiction, and autistic individuals are much more likely to get addicted to video games, to where it gets to be a problem. They don't want to do anything else.
Yeah.
And they're just living in that world, but they're not doing anything to create the world, like programming jobs or art jobs, something like that. You know,
Yeah,
that
I do think that he did do a little bit of kind of graphic art stuff, designing characters, but he hasn't really done anything. I think it was mostly just for his enjoyment. So
well,
he
this is
hasn't.
where I started my business. I was painting signs when I was his age. You know, and I had a little sign painting business that gradually morphed into cattle corral layout business. But you have to learn how to do the artwork that other people might want.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you do some artwork, like sort of a car dealership or something like that, you've got to make artwork that a car dealership would want. Some of what I've seen on the artwork that people on the autism spectrum make, some of it's really high quality and some of it's not.
Mhm.
But I'm seeing too many of these kids where they're just going in the video game world and they're not supporting themselves. I wouldn't be so critical if they were getting fabulous jobs in the industry, in that industry. That's not happening. I think there's a lot of individuals in that industry that are probably autistic, but they're probably the Asperger type, and they were never diagnosed. And then there's some people that are getting diagnosed later in life when their relationships are a mess. And that's where the diagnosis is helpful. And some people almost feel it as a relief. And I discuss that in Different, Not Less. This is 18 older people diagnosed later in life that got an autism diagnosis because their relationships had problems, all employed. Learn how to work at a really young age. So I think probably the video game industry probably got a lot of people on the spectrum but I've seen so many kids getting so baby, they just aren't learning any work skills. We need to start working on getting these kids working before they graduate from high school. Even like 10 hours a week, just a few hours a week to learn how to work. So that when they finish high school, it's not a big jumping off a cliff to start working. So it's a gradual transition. And some can be really good at some of the entrepreneur stuff.
Hands-on type of work skill set.
Well, and just also, even if they just got a job at a coffee shop while they were still in high school. So they learn working skills before they graduate. And a lot of people on the spectrum have been very successful. I mean, look at Elon Musk, he's autistic. Well, he was doing entrepreneur stuff when he was a kid. He was making video games and selling them when he was a kid. Now, of course, he's just old enough to have avoided some of the most addictive video games. Because I looked up what he would have played.
Technology is huge, Dr. Grandin. What benefits do you see through technology?
Well, right now is a benefit of technology. And I think that there's going to be not everybody's just going to en masse move back to the office. But on the other hand, there's a need, especially if your job involves something creative, you need to do a certain amount of collaboration in the office because there's informal contacts that you only make in the office. I'll give you an example. I read a story about a lady that worked on developing mRNA vaccines. And she was from another country, managed to get a postdoc over in the US, started working on mRNA. All her grants were turned down. People just stuck their nose at this is crazy. All her grants, grant after grant after grant, turned down. And then one day she met the right person at the copy machine. And the rest is history. That's why there needs to be a certain amount of going into the office. The right collaborator.
The teamwork.
That would not happen. That would not happen on Zoom. That sort. Now, if you're just doing hotel reservations or something like that, yes, that can be done at home. That doesn't have to be done in the call center. But but there's so many jobs where, I mean, I'm just thinking about, just collaborating with other people, going to live meetings. And I've been doing live meetings in the continental United States. I learned things at those meetings that I'm not going to learn, chance meetings, get talking to people that would not happen on Zoom. And I think a lot of companies are realizing that they got to have some getting back in the office, so not every day of the week. If I got to get serious writing done, I don't get serious writing done in the office.
Dr. Grandin, what about autistic employees working in the field of disabilities?
Well, that's good, but I also want to see them, that field will fill up. Like there was a very good project a while ago called Project Search. And they got autistic individuals to work in hospitals, setting up instruments for surgery. And they were very, very good at this. But then those jobs run out. And those jobs are now taken. So you've got something that's, you know, and the individuals that did the Project Search stuff were much more likely to be employed later on in something else. But those jobs then run out. Well, the hospitals got their super meticulous instrument setup person. So there's a limit to how many jobs that are available in disabilities.
In terms of independent living and the idea of doing with and not for, helping persons with disabilities move forward, having a mentor possibly that
Well,
does.
mentors are really important, but then I went to a disability conference about 5 years ago. I thought this was just awful. There was a blind person, very articulate blind person, and he was trying to get jobs in customer service, strictly going to be a phone job. This is before Zoom got real popular. Strictly going to be a phone job, totally qualified to do the job. And he got turned down from like 20 interviews, which is horrible. And completely qualified to do the work. And I think what happens is the HR person sees the guide dog and goes, this is just going to be too much trouble, and passes them over. Now, I was thinking of another way that you could approach this. Instead of if he's just gone in there and said, you know, I've already had some interviews. People freak out when they see the dog. They think it's just going to be too hard to do the accommodations that I might need. Let me tell you something. I'll give you a 2-week free trial. I only need one accommodation, the special software on the computer. It's the only accommodation that I have to have. My friend will be there for the first week, so the dog learns the layout of the office. You don't have to do anything except give me the software. I'll bring in everything else. I won't wreck your computer system. I bet you would have gotten the job if he'd come in that way. And I just heard the other day about an autistic guy that came in and he says, I interview just terrible. So I just show you a portfolio of my work. Got the job. Maybe a little different way of going about it. And I think we need to be doing a lot more backdoor going at jobs.
Those
And
are great examples.
Well, Microsoft has been doing things. But you have to look at, and then you see the visual thinkers like me, there's a huge need in factories for fixing equipment, in repairing industrial equipment. Right now, we've got a shortage of people that, you know, in construction trades. I was looking at some of the damage to one of the buildings. Well, I'm not sure if somebody had forgotten to weld some weld plates on some tilt-up concrete walls. Yeah, it's an important detail. I was looking at how the panels fell down. And also, we've got tornadoes that are much more powerful now than we ever used to have.
Well, let me ask.
Details matter in construction.
Yes, very much so.
And
Safety.
people with autism are really, really into details. But you have to pick out what details important. Some details are more important than others. And in food safety, we call those critical control points. They're the details that are really important. I love that term, critical control points. Which details are important?
Do we have any other questions from the audience?
Oh, so DVR in Alaska is still doing Project Search. Well, that's good. And I think the Project Search model, let's copy that model in other industries. Because what they did in the Project Search is find something the autistic person be super good at, very specific thing in the hospital, and have them do it. we could copy the project search model and use it in other places. Because I know in some parts of the, they ran out of the jobs. You know, you take like LA or something like that, you're gonna run out of the jobs. But how you can expand that model.
Expanding it into the workplace.
Well, just expanding it to other industries. Hospitals just one industry. Expand it to something else. Okay, like setting up surgical instruments. That requires you have to be very meticulous about the sterilization and exactly how they're laid out so the doctor doesn't grab the wrong thing. See, I can see that. Now, what are some other industries where some of those kind of skills would be valued? Okay, for the verbal autistics, going over contracts. You know, just going over contracts, reading all the fine print. Analyzing satellite photos is another one. But there's going to be limits on how many of those jobs are available.
A lot of those require some education as well.
Well, they were having some of this stuff on laying out surgical instruments would require sixth grade arithmetic and reading. That's actually all it would require. I've seen people running big, huge, gigantic factory who barely graduated from high school, and he has a corporate jet, and I've been on it. But I can't tell you where the jet went, except it was in the continental United States. It's Willy Wonka's stainless steel wonderland. He started out dirt poor, washing food processing equipment, and he migrated over to the maintenance shop. We discussed what labels he would have been: juvenile delinquent, oppositional defiant, autistic, you name it, he had it. Owns a big factory. I've been there. Unfortunately, because these people are not declared, I have to be very vague about it. Elon Musk, I don't have to be vague because he came out on Saturday Night Live. Okay, parents and decision making. I'm seeing a lot of parents that baby too much. What you got to do is stretch. You don't chuck them in the deep end of the pool like a horrible takeout window full of multitasking. You don't do that. Don't force them into that. But a lot of parents baby way too much. Oh, good. I'm glad to see some other people here in Thinking in Pictures. And then my book, The Thinking in Pictures, just came out with a new afterword. And this is where I describe what Thinking in Pictures is like. Well, good. The local hospital is training programs, pharmacy tech. Well, that's one where it's really important to not make a mistake and put the wrong prescription in the wrong bottle. Now I'm seeing my pharmacy now where I get my prescriptions, putting the pills, they have a special little tray they put the pills in. I'm seeing that now. Yeah, these are things that expand more of these things where these are jobs that can be careers. Where bagging groceries for most fully verbal people with autism, I hope they would use that for training job. Important training job, and there's our intellectually challenged clients where bagging groceries is an appropriate career. See, the problem is the verbal thinker tends to overgeneralize. Okay, now we got somebody here, Christine. You think in pictures. Then you should start being able to visualize good jobs for people. Now, I have a lot of experience in factories. Every time I get a chance to tour a factory, I'm jumping on it and doing it.
I like your concept of the back door, and there are hiring persons who are on the screen. The different options you gave for how to interview or hear of someone's skill set, even the portfolio.
And then with a blind person, I think what happens is you just look at that and you go, oh, it's just going to be too hard. There's 5 other applicants. I can just stick them in the cubicle tomorrow and I'll do the job. I mean, I've been in enough corporations that I can kind of see where the HR person would be coming from. I'm not saying I agree with it, but I can see where they'd be coming from. And I had a blind roommate, so I know that the accommodations aren't that hard. What we did is we put my bed on the far end of the room, all my junk in the far end of the room, and I had to be very careful not to leave junk out on her side of the room. That was about the only accommodation that we did. And so she didn't have to walk through my stuff. You know, now I'm visualizing that maybe the blind person would like a cube on the end of the row, so you didn't have to walk over other people's junk, but that's not essential. The only thing that's essential is the software.
Mhm.
And I'm just thinking, he was very articulate. He gave a talk at this disability conference, it just made me sick. You know, and a lot of people that have disabilities have been good at starting their own businesses. It's Elon Musk has his own business, you know, ranging from small businesses to big businesses. But then I was very lucky that Jim, the contractor, one of my mentors, he had to show me how to set up a business. In fact, he got me in touch with his own lawyer that set up his corporation to set up my business, because you can't, you know, stuff, you have to be a business and it has to be set up.
There's a couple of comments in the chat. One is acknowledging you being the idol to a person's daughter, Dr. Grandin. She's watched your video.
Well, I hope that she gets out, and I wonder how old the daughter is. Well, this is a good one, the reverse job fair model.
Mhm.
That sounds good. I mean, we just got to get innovative.
Mhm.
Well, the problem is, you know, and then COVID's just really, oh, like during our lockdown, it was just the restaurants, it's really bad.
I wonder, Kim, if you're still on.
But you
Have
see,
you,
where I know you're bringing up a lot of things where there's different grants and stuff. See, my background being livestock industry and you know, heavy commercial construction, and also scientific research. So many of the people I worked with were like self-made people, and it was something like a welding class or a drafting class, one class at community college. Now, this guy was not autistic, but he was switching careers. He took a single class at a community college and did a very nice drawing of a water valve, took it down and showed it to the engineering department at Montfort's, and we did a lot of jobs together. Yeah, he's not autistic, but that's an example of just showed the work. They needed someone. And what's happening with these people labeled draftsmen, they're laying out entire factories. They're designing factories. No, I've been there. I've seen it. See, this is the, and a lot of these people, I mean, he walked in the front door, but he walked in the front door with a very, very good portfolio. He did not have it. He was actually a veteran. He's a veteran. And they took one look at the drawing and they hired him.
that's a good story.
And it was a single semester long class in CAD drafting. And his job previously had nothing to do with construction or drawing. You know, that's you have right now people that are really good at drafting, people really good at welding. Let me tell you, they are needed. I just looked at some construction just the other day. I can't say where I went. I thought the construction was pretty bad. And when I look at it, it's because they didn't have a really good welder that knew how to build things.
What I'm encouraged to hear by what you're saying is a person doesn't necessarily need to do a whole bunch of schooling to be successful on the job.
Especially in high-end skilled trades.
Mhm.
This is the one place where you don't have to do past high school. You're judged strictly on your work. And I'm talking high-end skilled trades. I'm not talking about roofing or something like that. I mean, the real high-end, you know, are you working on a flat work concrete crew? No, because you're really working on the skilled stuff. And we have a gigantic shortage in that. Like right now, if you want to build a poultry processing plant, you got to import it from Holland. Now the building's made here. But we need, there's two parts of engineering. There's the visual side of engineering. I call it the clever engineering department, that invent all kinds of really clever equipment. And then your degreed engineers do boilers, refrigeration, and the building. But the degreed engineers, here's where you need people like me. I heard about the Webb telescope is going to be launched in December 22nd. It was delayed. One of the reasons why it got so delayed is it failed a shake test. You know, rockets vibrate. And this thing has to unfold. And when they did the shake test, a whole bunch of screws and stuff fell out of it. Well, that's the sort of thing where a good visual thinker working in a shop, and I watched 60 Minutes last night, got to see what the shop that was made in looked like. And that probably wouldn't have happened. They would have said, if you use that kind of fastener, it's going to come out. Or you don't glue the fasteners, they're going to come out. You see, that's the sort of thing you need my kind of mind, maybe hasn't even graduated from high school, to say that fastener isn't going to pass the shake test. You see, the mathematical mind doesn't see that. But if that thing doesn't unfold, it will fail. I hope they found all the stray hardware that got shook out of it. They did not mention that last night in 60 Minutes, but I found that in a Popular Mechanics article and a General Accounting Office report. You know, why am I looking this stuff up? Because you need my kind of mind, the kind of mind that gets addicted to video games. Were a couple of weld plates not welded on that building where the whole front slabs fell down? Yeah, it's a detail, it matters.
Dr. Grandin, do you have experience working with folks from rural areas that experience?
Oh, yes. Yes, I do. Ranchers, absolutely. And somebody is good at welding, let me tell you, there'll be plenty of stuff for them to do out in rural areas with ranching. Oh, yes. Yeah, there's and one of the biggest problems I've run into in talking to people working with disabilities is transportation.
Yes.
That is one of the biggest barriers, because I didn't know how to drive. I had a vehicle and I wouldn't have been able to have done cattle stuff without a vehicle. Yeah, transportation is a huge issue, and that's a big issue out in the rural areas.
It is. In Alaska, especially.
Yeah, I can see that.
You're right on.
But I think sometimes we overgeneralize. I have a certain amount of problems with taking a wheelchair person, okay, physically injured in a wheelchair, and lumping that in with autism. Their needs are really different.
Yes.
They're not going to have, person in a wheelchair is probably going to have the social problems. They have very different needs. I liked what Stephen Hawking had to say about disability. Before Stephen Hawking died, the famous scientist, physicist, he said, concentrate on those things. Your disability does not prevent you from doing well. That's quoted from the New York Times interview. He could do math in his head really well and not much else. But boy, did he do math in his head really well.
Really, really well.
Yeah, I mean, that's all we need to do. And you probably have quite a few people with, you know, autism living out in rural areas. Well, there's all kinds of rural, you know, hunting guides, things like this. Some people will be really good at a lot of that stuff. Ranching.
Mhm.
Yes, and that's a world I do know. And I've worked with, and I've worked with welders and people that own machine shops and metal fabrication shops that I know they were on the spectrum.
Well, I want to offer, just if anyone else has any last questions before we close, please let us know now. Anything out there? No? Dr. Grandin, just to give you one last, any closing statements that you would like?
Well, I think we need to be concentrating on what the person can do. I'm a big believer in developing strengths, and people with autism have uneven skills. And oftentimes there's too much emphasis on the deficits and not enough emphasis on the strengths. So as a person's visual thinking, well, you can forget about algebra, but jobs like skilled trades, graphic design, industrial design, these are all things to be really good at. The mathematicians, regular engineering, university degree engineering, computer science, computer programming, physics, chemistry jobs. And then the word thinkers, well, of course, writing. Specialized retail is a really good job for quite a few people that are autistic, where they'll be appreciated for their knowledge of the products. A bank hired 2 verbal autistic people to sell financial products. And they've been very successful. You know, that's where knowledge of the product was appreciated. And I did a Zoom call for them this summer. Now, I don't know of any programs where they can learn about industries. Also, there's amazing stuff you can learn about industries just looking up on YouTube. You know, you can look up, well, how does an Amazon warehouse work? Well, you can see a video that shows you how it works.
Absolutely.
I looked up last night after I looked at all the pictures of busted up buildings on tilt-up concrete. How does tilt-up concrete construction work? I looked at some videos last night. It shows exactly how it works. You pour the slabs on the ground, then you pick the big panels up with the crane and set them in place. And there's weld plates on them, and you've got to weld them. And I think that might not happen on some of these buildings that are trashed. But the factory that was the old-fashioned conventional construction, it was worse. Candle factory, that was, the whole thing was flattened. And the people had congregated in the hallway. Normally that would protect you from a tornado. No, it didn't.
Well, and certainly our thoughts go to that part of the country impacted by the tornadoes.
But there's a home auto maintenance. Okay, here's somebody doing home auto maintenance off of YouTube. And there's an ad for YouTube too about the things that you can learn. Well, just things like YouTube and Google are not being used to the full extent. I have parents say, how do I find a school for my kid? Well, they never thought to look it up on Google. You know, they did. Would have liked if they come to the meeting with some web pages and had me look at them or show me some web pages. They hadn't even thought to look it up on Google. Colleges in their state. Colleges in Ohio, for example. They don't think to look the stuff up.
You're correct, Dr. Grandin. If you can learn how to cook a steak on YouTube, you can learn how to take care of a vacuum and repair your
Right
vacuum.
here, somebody's learning so much in Alaska, learning doing home auto maintenance.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yes,
because it's hard. You know, you're out of the way and it's hard to get stuff. Then you're going to have to learn how to do it yourself.
Mhm. Well, Dr. Grandin, we really appreciate your time and your comments and ideas, and you've given us a lot of very, very useful information to move forward on. Really appreciate you coming and joining us today.
Well, I hope I've given you some good ideas.
Oh, yes, you have.
Okay, great.
Absolutely. I myself am very, very thankful because I often think about my agency here and how we can do better and work better with
Well,
folks.
one of
like
the things that would be good if you ever, get down in the lower 48 and get a chance to visit some factories, I would do that. And the other thing, have you ever been on a construction site?
Yes.
You might need to go deeper into that.
A lot of
skilled
opportunities
trade
there.
stuff. Now, because for the visual thinkers like me that are autistic, skilled trades is a really good route. For the word thinkers, the ones that love baseball statistics, skilled trades would not be the route.
Okay.
And then the math thinkers, a lot of computer programming type of things. You see, but not everybody on the spectrum is a techie that belongs in the computer field. You see,
Right.
that's more the mathematical kind of minds. They're the ones that are going to be the programmers. And the visual thinkers are going to be industrial designers, machinery designers, and skilled trades and and art. And the word thinkers are often very good at specialized sales, where they're appreciated for their knowledge of printers, let's say at an office supply store.
Mhm, mhm.
They'll know every printer in there, its good points, its bad points. They might need to be coached on, you just can't trash the cheapest printers in there. You can't call them pieces of garbage.
Right.
When you work for a store, they need to be coached on maybe a little more diplomatic way to talk about it.
Well, guys, we're going to end our session today. I want to thank everyone who joined. We will be picking back up next month with another topic to review and continue our advocacy moments and tea talks. We're very, very gracious. Help us thank again once more Dr. Grandin for her time this morning.
Okay, well, it's great to be here, and I'm going to leave the meeting now. And thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much.
Goodbye.
So much. Bye-bye.